Today we've got a fuel tank that can't be chromed, or that's what the customer's been told. Let's see if we can do it. And here the tank is. This is off of a Velocette motorbike. It's been given to another restorer and they've stripped it and they've started polishing it and they've abandoned the job. They're saying that it's too thin and it can't be done. Now it can be done, it's just going to take some extra work. It's in a bit of a state. This isn't as bad as it looks, it's surface rust. But where there's a big problem here is where this has gone blue. This is where it's very, very thin. Thankfully they've stopped when they've realised that they can't take any more off. But we're not going to be able to polish that up on the steel. In fact, you can hear how thin it is. How thin. This tank looks like it's already had the old plating stripped off it, so we just need to deal with the rust and then we can make sure that it's ready for polishing. Now that it's wired up, we can go and put it in the hydrochloric acid to dissolve the rust off it. It's the same sort of acid that's in your stomach, but a little bit stronger. Now that it's been there for a while, you can see all the rust has gone. You can see that this tank has got some existing brazed repairs. This isn't the first time this tank's been re-chromed, which could explain why it's a little bit thin in places. Now it's just a case of letting it dry off. Now the tank's in the plating shop, we're going to mark on the approximate lines of the chrome pattern. Doesn't have to be too exact because we're going to be a bit generous when we're polishing it anyway. Time to get the gloves on. Just going to concentrate on the area that's eventually going to be chromed and seen. You don't have to worry too much about the painted area, as it's just sort of wasted time and energy. You've got to be very careful as you polish around that raised badge mount, because if you catch the corners you could polish through it very easily. A nice bit of slow-mo video here. It just goes to show that you can't remove marks without making sparks. This first polishing operation we call cutting out, because this is where you've got to cut out all of the corrosion marks and any other marks that are in there, and from there you go to progressively finer abrasives that are removing the marks that you put in previously. You have to work very methodically and never hold it in one spot. This is that spot where it was thin around this area at the front left hand side of the tank. It's difficult to see on the video, but he is being very gentle around the area and just giving it a tickle. Now that the first polishing operation is complete, it's time to have a look and see if there's any repairs that need doing. There's an area on that thin patch that's looking a bit suspect, and a few little minor areas that might need some attention. After dipping the tank in our cleaner solution, we've found that there's a little tiny pinhole. We're going to have to repair this. We're going to have to use lead to repair this tank. Where them little holes are, we're just knocking them inwards. The reason for this is you need somewhere for the lead to cling to. Now you can see the extent and how thin that was. This is tinning paste that's going to coat the steel so that you can get the lead to stick to it. You heat it until it goes silvery, there it goes, and then you wipe it off quickly with a clean cloth. Now you can start melting some lead into that area. The art of this is heating it up enough so you can put it on there without it running off the side of the tank. Now that you've got it off there, you need to smooth it out. This is a repair that I had to do myself. The guy that does our metalwork repairs on the tanks is an absolute master at this, and after he's smoothed it out, there's hardly anything left to do. Once it's smoothed out, you file the excess off. Someone who's really experienced with lead work will smooth it out better than I did, and you'll have far less to remove with the file.
Now that the vast majority of it is off, you can use an orbital sander to remove the rest. If this tank had have been much more solid, it would have been possible to cut patches out of the tank and have them welded in, but unfortunately this is way too thin, so you can't do that. So what you've got to do is work with lead, because it won't distort the tank as it's a much lower temperature you're working at. Nearly done. Some of the other dents were leaded in the same manner, and some didn't need repair because they're in the paint pattern and so are going to be painted over. We've already soldered some copper tags to the bottom of this tank so that we've got something to wire to. So here we are, putting some copper wire so we can pass an electric current through it. Now it's into the hot soapy cleaner tank. We must make sure that we remove every trace of grease, dirt, fingerprints, absolutely everything. It's got to be perfectly clean before we can plate it. Physically cleaning it is not enough, so we're now putting it in an electric cleaner, and when we throw the switch on this, it's going to fizz off all the oxides that may have formed on the steel. Now it's going through our rinse system. It's going to be rinsed in water tanks, going from dirty to progressively cleaner. Fuel tanks are a pain because you have to make sure that you drain all the water before you move on to the next tank, so they are a bit time consuming. Here we're in the clean water. But before we can start plating, we've got to make sure that all of the residue is off from the soap. So to remove that, we dip it in a dilute sulfuric acid tank. It's about as strong as vinegar. Now that it's rinsed again in the clean water, it's going into the cyanide copper tank. This type of copper plating just puts a thin coating on. You can see it start to plate straight away. You can see it fizzing away there. You know it's ready when it's this nice salmon pink colour.
Great.
We're now going to give it a swill before we get it ready to go into the acid copper. The acid copper is where the high build copper goes on, but you can't put it directly on top of steel because it won't adhere and it will attack the surface. Because of it attacking the surface, we've got to bung this tank up because it won't plate internally, so the internals of the tank will be bare steel. So what's going to happen is while it's plating in that solution, which is very, very acidic, it's going to be eating away the inside of the tank. So time to fill it all up with water so that it will sink. We have to mask the filler neck up because it will build up and then you won't be able to get a filler cap on it. After all that faffing about, it's time to get it into the acid copper tank. Even with the water in it, it will still want to float, so we need to weigh it down. If it floats, it will touch one of the anode bags and then it will be absolutely wrecked. So let's put some amps on there and we're going to leave it cooking away in there for a few hours to put a nice thick deposit of copper on. When it's ready to come out, you'll instantly see it's looking a lot brighter. So a quick swill. Removing all the bungs now. Letting that water out. Then we're going to give this a dip in our cleaner. The reason is it has an anti-rusting effect on the inside of the tank. And there it is, ready to go to be polished again. Now it's time to go over this tank and make sure that we can get it to a mirror finish before we can plate it in nickel and chrome. This will be a fine abrasive belt, probably about a 600 grit. He's now carefully having a go at that area where the repair section is. We want to make sure that bit's right before we continue polishing the rest of the tank. The mop that we're fitting here is called an airflow. Now we've cleaned it, we can put some polishing compound on it and we can use it to polish this up to a mirror finish. These airflow mops are very quick in use, and also they help keep things that you're polishing cool because they create a lot of turbulent air around the front of the wheel. They're not for beginners though, because they're very grabby and they want to pull the workpiece out of your hand if you're not careful. Now that we can inspect that major repair, we can see everything's fine and we can move on to sorting out the rest of the tank, knowing that we're not wasting our time. We're using the sander just to refine the surface so that it makes it a lot easier to mop. You can see how the shine is really starting to build now. Now you can see we're getting that mirror polish, which is what we need before we can plate it with nickel and chrome. That should be finished now, but before we take it into plating, we need to just wipe off any polishing compound so that we can do a final inspection on the polishing. So this is all okay and ready for the next stage. The same as we did for the copper plating, we've got to wire it up on copper wires for the nickel and chrome. Into the cleaner again. Just as before, we've got to make sure that this is absolutely perfectly clean. With the amount of work that's gone in it so far, lack of cleaning would be a really bad mistake at this late stage. Now the power's going through it, it's going to blast those oxides off the surface so that we know that it's perfectly clean. Here we are going through the rinse system again. Now we're into the dilute acid to remove any trace of soap from the surface of the tank. One final rinse in the clean water and we're finally going to be ready for the nickel plating. The nickel plate is where all of the good looks and the weather protection come from. So we're going to let it cook away in here for a good hour or so. These fuel tanks are a real pain, how you have to drain them between every tank. And now it's into the chrome. The chrome layer is only very thin. It's not normally any thicker than 200,000ths of an inch. It's time to rinse off some of this chrome solution. And then any remnants of chrome solution left on it are now neutralised in this tank. And that's rinsed in water again. So we hang it up just for the water to dry off. Now that it's dried off, it's time to give it a wipe over with some polish, just so we can inspect it. And here it is, the finished tank. Just to remind you what it used to look like and what it looks like now.